Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 28th episode of the Be Life podcast, coming to you from Canton Nazarene Church in Canton, Ohio, and we're so grateful that you joined us again today. Josh and I and Zach behind the screen making this all possible, and we just thank you. And if you like this podcast, if you've been tuning in, or if you just like this one, this is the first time, take the time to subscribe to us on YouTube and to like us and what is it called?
You can share the video. If you're watching on YouTube, you have to ring the bell for notifications.
On YouTube?
Yeah, if you want to keep up with the content that we're releasing each week.
Well, what about the other things?
On the other
platforms? Like us or you follow us? That's
yeah.
What you do.
Yeah, if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, give us a follow.
All these terms that used to be personally, used to be you like us, you follow us. That would mean that you literally had people following you down the street and they were liking you. And now I don't get all this.
They say that the engineers of the platform did it so you get a little dopamine hit, right? Because
really?
I have friends, I have followers. Oh, they hearted it, they liked it. That must mean that people like me. And so you get that little bit of a hit each time you're scrolling through your phone and you see, oh, someone liked my photo, someone liked my status.
But then they may have liked you just to hate you.
This is true. There is a lot of subtext when it comes to online literacy.
Yeah, I don't get it all. I'd rather meet at a coffee shop and talk, and then you could tell me if you hate me or like me face to face, and or just sit around the table like this and talk and argue and
going analog.
Yeah, analog. Going analog. How about just going real? I wanted to talk to you today. And Josh and I talked about this, and we've got something going on here at Canton Nazarene that I'm excited about. And I want to give just kudos to our church because I think this is real important. We are, and all churches should be, I think, outward focused churches. If you're coming in to get fed all the time, then you become stagnant. You're feeding yourself, but you're not giving to others. And that wasn't what Christ wanted us to do in our lives. He wanted us to go out. He wanted us to take what he gives us, the blessings that we get from God, and to then turn those and empty those into other people's lives. And he said to neighbors. Now, neighbors doesn't necessarily mean that they're your neighbors and they're your friends. They're people who are in need, who you might not even know. And we at Canton Nazarene, I think, do a great job. Pastor Dan leads this focus and emphasizes this in everything we do. But we have at one time, every year, every Thanksgiving, a couple of years ago, we gave out 300 meals, provided 300 meals in conjunction with our local school district here, Canton City Schools, where they drove up and took the meals, the boxes with turkeys and everything in them, and then went to their schools and gave them to the most deserving families, the ones who needed it most. We do boots and coats in the winter. We do backpacks and school supplies in the fall for kids. We do serve days here where we go out in the community and paint and clean up streets and straighten up clothing and everything that you could possibly do. And then we have missions that go, one mission group just got back from Romania. Well, one thing we're doing right now, and it just started this past week, is we made a decision to step out of our comfort zone a little bit and kind of take on something that was going to be done really quickly. And that was to gather goods and services, not services, goods, water, diapers, everything, and fill up as many 26-foot moving trucks as we possibly could. So we had to rally everybody and rally the trucks, and people are behind it and get everybody going. And it's, some of the comments we've got is, this was great. This was, I think, Josh, and I'm going to ask you this, but when you take on great tasks that are beyond your abilities and you look at them and they seem so daunting and you just keep moving ahead and praying, God reveals himself to us in that moment. And we get to see how big he truly is, how great he truly is. And that's what we're doing right now at here at Canton Nazarene and we're going to take all this stuff down to Asheville, North Carolina. Our goal is to leave Wednesday morning, and we've already lined up. It's going to be church to church, part of the Nazarene community, and we know it's going to get in the hands of the people who need it most, and that's what's great.
Yeah, a lot of times we have something like a natural disaster that's completely out of our hands. And those things come time and again. And a lot of times we see them in the news. We see them as we're scrolling on our phone, but we don't think it's going to happen to us personally. And when it does, it can be overwhelming. I know that my family in the past we've been hit by disaster. I mean, years ago we had our house burned down and we lost everything. And it was so reassuring to know that we had our church community around us to support us in that moment. And ever since then, years later, I just feel drawn to support people who are going through things like that, whether it is to just reach out and be encouraging, to recognize what's happened to them, or in this case, to be able to go buy things and give them out. I know that last week my wife asked, she said, "What's the church doing in response to this?" And I said, "Well, I don't know. I don't know if we're doing anything yet. Do you want to take a truck down there and deliver some stuff?" And then it was literally the next day that I got word that our church was going to be doing that together. And so I think that's really encouraging, because I don't know if Hannah and I alone would have been bold enough to do that. But since we know that our church community is doing it together, we'll happily be a part of it.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people, we've put the word out to other churches. We've put the word out to many organizations. And it's the same thing, Josh. A lot of people want to do it, think there's a need to do it. There's two camps. There's one that says the government's going to handle it. And we know that the government's one size fits all solution to every problem doesn't often get down to the lowest levels of where it needs to get.
Yeah, that's true.
And it takes, and we were called on. Our government wasn't created to do these things. It's not supposed to do these things. As much as we would like for them to do it, they don't do it well. Who does it well are us, our people doing it directly to and for other people.
I've been so grateful in recent years for programs like GoFundMe, where I see individuals who are in need, they share their story online, and immediately humans from all over the place that can relate to their story, empathize, and give,
Yes.
and are able to accomplish amazing things.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm so grateful that we have resources like this podcast to get the news out, or social media, so that we can rally together and make a difference, so that we as the people can be effective in loving our neighbor.
Yeah. And for those of you who are maybe watching this podcast outside the country, maybe you don't know, but we had a major hurricane hit the Gulf Coast of our country, Florida, and then work its way up all the way into North Carolina.
By the time I got to Ohio, we just had like good rain. It helped my grass grow. Yeah. I'm like, oh, this isn't too bad, until we start seeing reports of how hard it hit some of these communities in the Appalachian Mountains.
Devastated. And just mud and floods and, a death toll that probably will match or exceed Katrina, which we all thought was probably the worst that we had seen. So it was a devastating hurricane. And so our goal here at the church was to reach, to say, we're going to do something. We are going to make a difference, which is part of our mission. We're going to make a difference in people's lives, and we're going to answer the call, and we're going to do what Christ wants us to do, what God wants us to do in Jesus Christ. And to trust that as quickly as this came together, and as daunting it may have seemed at the beginning, that he is stronger than that and he can make it happen. And he has brought people together. And our church, as the people of our church, have rallied around it so well, and the people of our community. Stark County, for those of you who don't know Stark County is an amazing place. Since I have been here, I have seen people rally constantly for things like this, for Wishes Can Happen, for terminally ill kids or critically ill kids who need a vacation, need to do things. And that has even affected people in our own church. Wishes Can Happen. And many other organizations here in Stark County that are designed to serve people, and how people rally behind it. So we're having people, this is an example of it. And we are called to stand in the breach, to be God's body, to be his arms and his legs. And while Jesus Christ is absent from this earth, we are his body. We are acting for him and with him and by the power of him and by the power of the Holy Spirit to fill these gaps and to make people's, to take away some of the just sadness and sorrow and the needs that are going on in their lives by bringing those things to them. And it's not always the goods. We're bringing a ton of goods. We're going to bring water and all the things they need. But it's just the fact that someone cares.
Yeah, I think that makes a big difference, especially some of these cities that are being hit. While some of them are relatively big cities and it's affecting large populations, a lot of these are rural communities that don't normally make national news. You know, I'm not normally seeing Tennessee and North Carolina on my social media feed.
Yeah.
And so I hope that these people don't just feel like a spectacle, but they feel like people are genuinely looking on them with compassion and caring about where they're at. And I hope that as time goes on, because this rebuilding process is going to be quite a bit. Like what we're doing right now is this response to a disaster, but then it's going to take weeks, months, years, depending on where you're at, to rebuild from this. And I hope that people continue to invest and continue to care about these communities. And so, yeah, I'm really proud of us for doing this, but I think that sort of reaching out and extending a hand relationally means a lot. And I hope that it's the start of relationships with some people there.
Oh, I believe so. I'm going to share something with you. This Nazarene Compassionate Ministries magazine, this happens to be the latest edition of it. And I was reading in it, and it was really funny because on page 18 of this, there is a story about how a community rallied around two churches and have been able to rebuild from a devastating tragedy. And this is the fire that took place in Maui. And this is interesting, Josh, because there are two pastors there, Mark and Tom Goodmanson. They are both big, burly, white-bearded Norwegian stock men who came from the United States, and both of them established churches in Maui. And when the fire hit, I, being just ridiculous, looked up Nazarene churches in Maui and called and established a relationship with Pastor Tom. And at that point, we helped as much as we could, my wife and I. But more than that, we got to know him, and we got to share his life and his life and his story, he and his wife, and all the things that they are going through. And he and his brother were able to, and I remember at the very beginning, he was like, Joe, the government, we're waiting for these supplies that are supposed to come in, and they haven't come in. But the Nazarene Church rallied the disaster recovery program that they're doing now in in North Carolina rallied and were able to ship tons of stuff. At one point, they said they were going through $10,000 to $15,000 a week of supplies for the people. And it almost seemed devastating, but the churches became the ones who rebuilt the city. And if you look at the pictures in this magazine, you can see them maybe, but the pictures in this magazine are all of the church coming up with the water. They came up with a system where they can draw water out of the atmosphere, and roughly they can create 100 gallons of fresh water per day from the atmosphere. And they were able to do that and pulling moisture out of the air. They've come up with, they've built things, they've worked with things. They are rebuilding Maui at the church level. And these two guys are unbelievable. They're not native Hawaiians. They're white as white can be, and they're big white beards, but they are amazing people. And I read this, and I haven't texted him for a while. I texted him this morning, Pastor Tom, and just said, I just read this article, and forgive me for not saying hi for a while, but this is an awesome story of testimony of what you're doing.
That's amazing.
And that's what we're doing.
That's so cool that, we get to be a part of it, partner with this arm of our denomination.
Yes.
That, I mean, based on what you're saying there, seems to be a pretty effective group. They seem to know what they're doing. I'm pretty excited for us to be a part of that.
Well, I think what it is you don't know what you're doing until it happens. And then you just start filling needs. And as you fill one need, you learn how to do that. And as you fill another need, you learn how to do that. And it's like this whole process of, I've never filled trucks and taken them to a place before that's a disaster. And so you wonder how it all has to happen.
Yeah.
And you just start one step at a time and praying.
That sounds like the same language that we use to describe faith. We talk about having faith in God and that our path is illuminated one step at a time. And our job isn't to know where we're going in the end, but to know what the next step is.
Amen.
We use that sort of language in this very conceptual way in church regularly. Well, this is an opportunity for us to exercise that faith.
Mm-hmm.
How do we respond to this? We don't just, Joe, I appreciate that you said you reached out and you called one of the pastors that was in Hawaii. Like, I love that you are unashamed enough to do that, because any normal person is just going to see, oh, wow, these fires, this is terrible. Well, what's for dinner tonight? Most people, they just turn it off like that. We're desensitized to it. And you're like, well, is there something we can do? I want to talk to the people that are there. And you're driven by that. So I'm so thankful for your boldness in doing that.
Thank you.
But yeah, faith is that one step at a time. And I think that the Nazarene Church models it well. And I hope that we as a community here in Stark County, that we can partner with them and that we can do that one step at a time. And yeah, I hope that this response that we're doing this upcoming week is the start of something, because this rebuilding process will be a while.
Oh, it will. But unbelievable people. And just getting, what happened is Justin Wells, who is our worship leader and on staff here, and just an unbelievable guy.
Yeah, we had Justin on a podcast a couple episodes ago. So if you guys don't know who he is, or you want to hear a little more about him,
you will.
Yeah, he has a really great story. He's a good guy.
I know. And so I got with Justin because I knew Justin was down there, and Justin said, hey, look, my wife's father, Angie's father, was a district superintendent for the Nazarene Church.
Yeah.
And she said, she knows this person's named Steve Creech, who is he's the one that's on the ground and was there immediately with the Nazarene disaster recovery team. So I was able to talk to Steve. I called him and I said, look, I know you from this and this and this. And he started talking and he started guiding me. And then he introduced me to Bobby and Alyssa, who are the co-pastors of this church in the First Nazarene Church of Asheville. And then Bobby and Alyssa are unbelievable. They're about 38 years old. To me, they were kids. I called them kids. And they said, well, thank you for that perspective. I said, well, yeah, it's about a perspective that's much older, but they're wonderful people. And they started guiding us with presenting us a list of everything that was needed by them, by their constituents, I like to say their family, their church family.
Yeah.
And their immediate around them, everybody around them. Because they went out and scoured and said, what are all the needs? They have kids of their own. So these were very heartfelt. This list came directly from them. So we know that we're meeting exactly the needs that they have. But here's the other part is we get to know them. They said, you come directly to this church. We're going to take all the goods. We're going to store them here at the church, and we're going to get them out from there. So we're going to get to know them. They're going to become part of our family, just like Tom Goodmanson and Mark. You know, we keep adding on to our family.
Joe, one of the things that I find really interesting is I grew up in an independent church, an independent Baptist church. And when I left that church, I said that I would never again be a part of an independent church. And I've had a lot of conversations with people, even my brother, we've had a lot of conversations about it. And we've talked about some of the theological implications of being an independent church versus belonging to a denomination. But when we hit something like this, when there are real needs that need met, and communication needs to happen and relationships need started in order to meet needs in people's lives, I am beyond grateful to be a part of a denomination.
I thought of the same thing.
To know that we have fellow Nazarenes, that we can trust them, that I mean, there's so many people that are like, how can we give to this? We've gotten comments on the video that we put out online that said, hey, here's the things we're collecting and we're taking the donation down. We've got comments on the video saying, there's no way, they're not going to let you in. They're turning people away. You know, how are we going to be able to actually help them? It's so good to know that we have names and faces of people who we are going to meet there.
Yes.
And we can trust them to not, you know, because there's a lot of sketchy things going on. There's looting and hoarding and we can trust those people to distribute things and to make sure that we're meeting people's needs because they're our brothers and sisters, they're fellow Nazarenes. And so it's just such a beautiful system. And I'm so thankful for it in times like this.
Yeah.
And I hope that, now that you have those contacts saved in your phone, that we can, beyond this trip, continue to reach out and say, what do you need next?
Absolutely.
What can we do for you now, and build a relationship with them?
Absolutely. And that is really what it's all about. And I agree with you. I've had those exact same thoughts, Josh, because there are times when I think of a doctrinal issue and say, oh, wouldn't it be nice if we weren't tied to that specific doctrine? I have to you admit that. But this church is so vibrant. The Nazarene Church is so vibrant.
Absolutely.
And the more things happen and the more you're in tune with them, the more you see things like the compassionate ministries, the disaster recovery, and how these people, and then talking to people like Steve Creech, who 2 days after the flood I was talking to, and he was down there.
Yeah.
And he was like, hold on, I'll get back to you. And he did. And it's like, hey, this is a mess, but I think you can get in. I don't know for sure, but I'm going to connect you with this pastor and his wife, this co-pastors.
Yeah.
And Bobby and Melissa or Alyssa are real people, and they were driving back from South Carolina, and we were talking.
And if it weren't for these real relationships, I would have the same concerns as some of the people that are commenting on our posts saying, how are you going to get in there?
Yeah.
I mean, that's a real concern to have, except we have people on the inside. And that's a good feeling.
And the other part is I'm stupid enough. I have to say that because I probably am. I'm stupid enough to believe that to naively, totally commit and believe that my God is bigger than any of the naysayers who say you can't get in, you can't go here, you can't do this. I just believe that once we're on the road, just like once we started this thing, it started rolling. And it's like a snowball going downhill. Once we get on the road, we're getting into Nashville
Oh
or
yeah,
Asheville.
yeah. There's no way you guys are driving for 7 hours and then saying, "Oh well, they said no. Let's turn around."
Turn around, and we're going to get in,
Yeah.
and God is going to open those doors,
Yeah.
because He knows that these people need it. He knows that our mission is not to bring us glory;
Mhm.
it's to bring Him glory,
Mhm.
and that we are only doing this because it was Him planning the need and saying, and here's the thing that's interesting. We often think that we're doing good for them. You have no idea. I was talking to Marianne Wise this morning, and she said, "You don't know what this has meant to me." And she's been running around like crazy. She's been everywhere, handing out flyers, doing things, shopping, going to meet people. Last night she was at First Friday meeting council people, and she got a picture taken with a councilwoman, and she's out doing things. And my wife is out all over the place shopping and dropping off flyers, and Cindy and Jim are out dropping off things, and Vicky and all these people. And when there is a big cause, there's great joy.
Yes.
And
Absolutely.
so God knows that this isn't just for them. This is for us. This is teaching us. And maybe some people who haven't done it before, that go, step out and experience me. Experience the great joy that I have for you. And so it's a 50-50 proposition. Maybe it's more us. I don't know. But God, I do know this. Life is meaningless and empty if it is all about me. If my whole life is about the selfies I take at McDonald's and want to put out on social, I'm at McDonald's, and Jesus didn't tell us to be that. He told us He wanted to burden us. He wanted to impress upon us what we need to do in Him. And He wants to bring us to the point where our faith exceeds our abilities.
Yeah. Oh yeah, because if you are only ever living in your comfort, what you know you can accomplish, then you've never experienced stepping out in faith. And once you have, then you realize, wow, this is a good feeling, and you realize, wow, God can actually do things. And Joe, I might have said decades ago that you were dumb and bold trying new things, but over the years you've been pioneers of lots of new programs and building relationships with people and traveling, and you've seen time and again that when you step out in faith and you care for your fellow man, that it pays off. And so now I think you're acting in faith. I don't want to discredit that, but I think you're also acting in confidence in the God that you know, that you've already seen God do amazing things when you step out in faith. So you're doing it again. God's got a good record, and so we're going to trust Him to do it again.
Does this sound wrong to say I'm addicted to it? I love seeing God work. And the only way I see Him work is when the cause is greater than me.
Yeah.
And my abilities. And now I'm looking at everyone else. I'm looking at Marianne and everybody else and just going, wow, this is wonderful. I'm watching them because they're just lit up.
Yeah.
And they're just.
Well, I feel motivated now, because what I did was like, I posted our videos and made sure that, social media was going to see those things. And then I told my coworkers, I'm like, well, but if there's people going around town and uniting people to the cause, maybe I should be a little more motivated.
Well, and now I was on the radio yesterday on WHBC. I did about 20 minutes on the AM and then another 20 minutes on the FM. And I got to share about this church. And I got to share about the Vickies and the Mary Anns and the Kirbys and the Jim and Cindy and everybody else who's involved. And I got to talk about on the air about this wonderful group of people who have accepted this challenge in the face of everybody else saying no. And now what we're seeing is other parts of the community. I got a call this morning from a friend who owns a brewery.
Oh, yeah.
And he said, what can I do?
That's
what can I
awesome.
do? Can I put stuff up? Can I put it on my social media page? What can I do? And I had a gentleman who owns a chain of nightclubs in Canton who gave us $500 yesterday. Yeah. And actually it's a guy who owns jerseys, Chris Majori.
Yeah.
And Chris just out of his love wrote it to me, because at that point I didn't know where the check should go.
Yeah.
So I said, Chris, you just make it out to me.
So
and
that's the thing is we got people all around the community, and you have testimony of it, that they want to do something and they're not sure what to do. And so it's a beautiful thing, I think, that the church is stepping in and being that mediator, following the example of Christ, who is our mediator, and saying, hey, we will help. You want to give, you're in need, we're going to make it happen. And so I'm so grateful that the church is leading the way with that.
Yeah. I mean, we just continue to do this stuff. And I look at it, I wanted to add really quickly that, Pastor Dan and I went to Kenya, and out of that, we officially broke ground 2 days ago on the very first home in Bungoma. And it's for the young lady we talked about. If you listen to the podcast regularly, there was a young lady, Jacinta, who was probably, I think she's 20 something, young girl, but 5 kids. And her husband goes away for like days to work. He's kind of a farmhand, to say it. Mm-hmm. He works for another person. He gets paid a little, and just enough comes home, just enough to feed the kids. And they live in a dirt home. Well, they're taking pictures like crazy, and I've got pictures yesterday of the foundation is being completely dug. It's dug. You could see the rooms. Oh, wow. You could see everything. And Josh, these young men did it by hand with hose. I'm serious. They started out there's a field covered with long grass. Next thing you know, with hose, handheld, they dug the entire house out.
Okay, Joe, I don't know what your algorithm brings you in terms of videos, but it never fails that about 2 a.m, and when I can't sleep, I'm laying in bed, and I always come across this video of some brown-skinned man in the jungle who, with these hand tools, is digging out an entire house underground. And they're the most fascinating videos in the world.
Seen those.
I love that content. So that's what I'm imagining as you describe this, is just very driven, hardworking, smart guys who are like, we got hand tools and we got the motivation. We're going to get it done.
And every row, every foundation dug out, it's probably about 3 feet down. The entire diagram of the house is built. And it's perfect. It's perfect. If I did that, it'd be like this. The lines are perfect, and they are so proud and overjoyed. And another lady who was with us a lot and helping and part of the Bible study and everything, she has now come on board today, and she's there and she's cooking meals for the workers. And it's all the young men that we met. But I don't want to get too far into this, but the point is, this is again our church reaching out, going over there, and then changing actually making something happen from it and not come home and just go, oh, that was wonderful.
Yes, yeah. It's people stepping out in faith, and it's people building real relationships. And I keep regularly being reminded of how it all comes back to just like a personal invitation. Like our relationship with that community in Bungoma started because one young lady in our church community
Yes.
was bold enough to invite her friend to church. And that's literally how all this started.
Yes.
And so some people might hear these awesome stories that we talk about of driving supplies down into flooded cities or flying out to Africa. And they might be like, wow, that's really cool. But I can't do that. No. This all started because a girl invited her friend to church. And so if people are willing to have that faith and be bold and take that first step, God's going to multiply it.
Amen. He really does. And I was looking at verses this morning, and really it's the same verse. It's just in different books. Matthew talked about it. Luke talked about it. Mark talked about it. John talked about it. But Jesus said, for whoever wants to save their life will lose it, but whoever loses their life for me will find it. And he says this over and over. In Luke, he says, whoever tries to keep their life will lose it, and whoever loses their life will preserve it. And then in Mark, for whoever wants to save their life will lose it, but whoever loses their life for me and for the gospel will save it. And I was thinking, God, Jesus is saying that. Jesus didn't give us that verse to burden us. He didn't give us that verse as a nebulous thought. He gave us that verse as if, and it was, coming from our Creator. It was like the user manual for our life.
That's the way to put it.
It was like, if you really want to experience life abundantly, joyfully, then give it up. Lose it. Give it up and pour yourself into others and watch how when I said I was addicted to God working, I am. Yeah. I'm addicted to watching his power and watching him as I step. Let me try and explain this. It's dark. The path is dark. As I step, each step lights the next one. Each step lights the next one. And you just pray and you walk. And you pray and you walk. And you don't know what's coming until you're there. Does that make sense?
It makes sense. Honestly, I feel like one of the hardest things when you're communicating something like this is motivating people to take that first step. So many of us are just spectators in life. Even those of us who are actively involved in church communities that are making a big difference. The majority of people that attend this church show up on Sunday morning and they watch, or they log in online and they watch, and they're spectators of what's going on. Hopefully they're inspired by the testimonies of those people that are doing more than just watching, but are stepping in and actually doing something. And I want everyone, that's my goal, is for everyone in our church community to take that next step that's in front of them, to move from being a spectator to being a participant. And I think that's one of the fundamental stories of Scripture. If we go back to the start of the Bible in Genesis, in the first chapters, God invites humanity to not just observe, but participate. The Scripture describes it as God inviting human to name the animals. And then he gives human his partner, Eve. And from the very beginning, before it was, here's your partner, have a family, build a home, it was, I want you to participate in this act of creation. And I think that there's a reason why the editors of the Bible put that right at the very beginning, because that should shape the way we read the whole rest of the Scripture and the way we live out our Christian lives, is that we are invited by God to be participants in changing the world, in bringing order, in making a difference, in showing love. Jesus said, what you've done for the least of these, you've done for me. When you give water to the thirsty, when you give food to the hungry. And it can be big, elaborate things. It can be simple things. But I think that the goal is just for us to, as you said before, be the hands and feet, to move from just watching it happen to being the ones who step out and do something.
And it's not a duty. It's like I said, it's Jesus telling us, giving us the user manual for how it's like saying, okay, that car needs oil. You need to give yourself away.
And when you drive a car that's had its oil changed regularly, you can tell that it's all running smooth.
Yes.
Right. And so, sometimes we can view it as it's time for a spiritual oil change. I got to do something I'm not willing to do. But when we do it, oh my gosh, it's worth it. And it makes a difference.
I can't imagine. Well, I can't imagine because I was there. I've been the person who thought I deserved everything. I was the person, and every once in a while that person still creeps in. So it's not like I've arrived, to say the least. But I've been that person who was all about me, and so there's no comparison to being all about me and watching God work. God is real. And when people when you realize that God is real and that he will direct your path and he will create miracles in your life. And when you finally see it and experience it and feel it and know it, then it's like it just unleashes your whole life. It's like, I want more of this. I don't want to be stupid. I don't want to, jump off a cliff because God's going to, that's testing. That's one thing.
Yeah.
But knowing that when he calls, that I can walk and that I don't necessarily run to get ahead of him, but I take that one step into the light and keep praying and keep trusting. I think of this. I keep coming back to Cabrini, Sister Cabrini.
I still haven't watched that movie. It's on my list.
I still come back to Sister Cabrini, Mother Cabrini. And if anybody has not seen that movie, you need to see it. A young nun with a terrible heart whose diagnosis is that she could die anytime. Leaves the comfort of the Vatican and takes 5 nuns to the United States. Suffers through every type of persecution for being Italian, not being able to speak the language, being a woman, every type of persecution that you could possibly have. At the end of her life, she ended up making 23 cross-Atlantic trips.
Oh, wow.
She ended up being in South America, Seattle, Washington, Chicago, New York, everywhere in the country, South America, Europe, everywhere. At the end, she established 67 institutions. She ended up forming this group of nuns that now is worldwide. For instance, Chicago, she created hospitals, a school, a retreat center. In Seattle, an orphanage, a school, a convent, a chapel, a hospital. Seattle. California, a chapel. Denver, an orphanage, a school, a camp. New Orleans, a school. She did these herself. New Orleans, a school, an orphanage. South America, schools and convents and orphanages. Central America, schools and convents and orphanages. Italy, she established a hospital, a school, a convent. France, New York, hospitals and orphanages, so on and so on. 67 different institutions this one lady established because she would not take no for an answer, in spite of she had every reason. I mean, there were times when she was on death's door where her heart just almost gave out. She lived till she was 67 years old. She died in Chicago. But she changed the world. A young, non-English speaking nun with no credentials. The Catholic Church wouldn't even talk to her. She was disowned by everybody. And yet her and these group of 5, there were 6 nuns, created this order that is now thousands of nuns, and created 67 places. And people have to watch this because it's true. And it's what we can all do.
I think one of the things that made me really proud to be a Christian was a few years ago when I learned that literally hospitals and colleges and universities as we know them today would not exist if it weren't for Christians. And that's why so many of them are named after saints, and why so many of them still have worship services or masses, is even though some of these organizations perhaps have grown beyond or strayed from their Christian roots, they wouldn't exist without Christians who were boldly following God and saying, what can I do to make a difference in the world?
I mean, all the Ivy League schools.
Yeah.
Almost all. I don't know all of them, but almost all of the Ivy League schools, Princeton, Harvard, all those.
People graduating from there literally shaping the face of the country and the world. And those institutions wouldn't exist without Christians.
Absolutely.
And to me, it makes me very proud of my brothers and sisters in Christ, and very proud to be a part of the family of God, but it also challenges me to say, well, what am I doing? What is the next step that God has for me?
Yeah. And that's what we need to do. I pray that I'm exhausted when I die. I mean, it is, and I fight it. I mean, my flesh still fights it. When we got into, every time something gets, like I realized yesterday we needed I think it's called a pallet jack.
Yeah, because our donations aren't coming in small amounts. We're getting palletfuls of donations.
Yeah. So we needed a pallet jack, and I was like, we need a pallet jack. But then the ramp going up the trailer is only 24 inches, and most pallet jacks are 27. So I was at Home Depot, and the guy goes, you can't find one of these. And so then he, because I told him the story, he got on the phone, started calling all over different places, found Sunbelt over here, Sunbelt Rental.
Yeah.
Down on Fulton or whatever. I don't know. It's down there by the Hall of Fame. And they have a 21-inch pallet jack.
Nice.
So I went to get it. And then I realized I can't put it in my car. So I texted Dana. Dana puts a trailer on the back of his truck, drives over there, loads up the pallet jack. It's sitting here in the church now. So we've got a pallet jack. But every time one of these things happen, I go, what am I doing? And
if you weren't hitting those bumps along the way, there might not have been the same opportunity for that guy at Home Depot to be a part of this.
Yes.
For Dana to hitch up his trailer and to use what God has given him to make a difference.
Yeah.
And so each time you're like, my plan's a little bit thrown off, it seems like God has a better
plan. Yes. And people step in and we find what we need, and people are willing to go above and beyond. And we're giving people an opportunity to see God.
No wonder Jesus comes across as such an optimistic person who's willing to love on people and see the value in the people that the community around him says, no, those are the outcasts, those are the unclean, just leave them be, Jesus. But he stops and he sees value in them. And I think it's because he saw and sees what their potential is. And I think when we look around and see our fellow humans and see the potential and see how we can partner with them, how we can have a relationship with them, see what they could be, then you can't really look at anyone and say, you're unclean. You're not really worth the time.
Yes.
It changes the way we view people.
Absolutely. All people. And and then there's that opportunity to fall in love with new people and realize that, wow, where have you been? Where have you been? I need you in my life. I
Yeah.
need Bobby and Alyssa now. I need Steve Creech in my life. Just like when Justin came here and we met him the first time, I need Justin in my life now. I need his family in my life. I love his kids, and that's, we keep, if we're open to that and we're open to expanding and being in the love of new people and the love of even the old people, just the overall love of community overwhelms you.
Mhm.
I was overwhelmed yesterday when I was reading, and even today when I was reading about Kirby being out shopping and Marianne being out shopping and Marianne sending a picture of her with a councilwoman and all these things and all this stuff going on. And then I walk in here and there's Jim and Cindy Moore in here unloading boxes and everything.
I love it.
This morning. And she's got them piled up on her lap in the front of because they don't have room in the truck. And I'm just overwhelmed.
Yeah.
I mean, I almost want you just want to break down and cry because there's so much joy and people, and I know they're experiencing joy.
Yes. Being a part of a community makes such a difference in that you get to share in the joy of others. And I don't have enough words in me to witness to people and to tell them how great it is to be a part of a church community. It just makes such a difference when it comes to, I need help with this, and people are there to help you. Hey, I lost things, and people are there to give to you. If it's, hey, I'm on a mission, they're there to support you. It's just, I've never known a world apart from it. But I hear people talk about, oh, yeah, we're moving this weekend and it's going to be 16 different trips in my truck. And I'm like, well, why don't you just call your friends? And it has to hit me. I'm like, oh yeah, I have a church community that comes around me and helps me to do those things. And so I feel for people that don't. And I just want to say to them, please come be a part of our church community.
Yeah.
I want you to experience the same sort of interconnectivity that we can rejoice with others and mourn with others and have real relationships with others and make a difference together. Yeah.
Wow. The one verse that came to, that I was thinking of that I've been thinking of all week is the parable of the Good Samaritan. And I thought it would be a good thing maybe to end with what Jesus said. And in reply, he was asked a question, and Jesus said, a man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho, and when he was attacked by robbers, they stripped him of his clothes, beat him, and went away, leaving him half dead. And a priest happened to be going down the same road, and when he saw the man, he passed by on the other side. So too a Levite who came, and when he came to the place and saw him, passed on the other side. But a Samaritan, as he traveled, came where the man was, and when he saw him, he took pity on him. He went to him, bandaged his wounds, pouring on oil and wine, and then he put the man on his own donkey, brought him to an inn, and took care of him. The next day he took out 2 denarii and gave them to the innkeeper, and he said, look after him, and when I return, I will reimburse you for any extra expense you may have. And then Christ asked, which one of these three do you think was a neighbor to the man who fell in the hands of the robber? And that is, how often do we walk past, how often do we hear things on the news and just, like you said, just go, oh, that's terrible. What's for dinner? I don't even want to think about what I can do for that because it just would overwhelm me. I just need to go off on something else. And it goes even further than our own country when we hear things going on in Israel and different places and Ukraine and all over. We are called by Jesus to keep our eyes and ears open and to listen to his voice and then to step out and help, because everyone is our neighbor. It's just, I am so overwhelmed right now. I'm so overwhelmed with joy and love, and I just want more. I want more.
The the there's this dumb reference that just came to my mind. This old movie, older, called Over the Hedge. It's this animated cartoon, and there's this line from it that says, "With Spuddies, enough is never enough." And since I was a kid, that line has stuck with me. And I think about when it comes to with community, enough is never enough.
Yes.
With God, enough is never enough.
Yeah,
when you experience these good things, you can't stop. As you called it, being addicted to it. Like when it comes to the goodness of God, enough is never enough.
Yeah. And once you start experiencing it, it's over for you. It's over for you, because you'll never be the same, and you'll never want to go back to being, hey, look at me. Let me take this picture. Anyway, I thank you again. I love you so much, Josh. I love spending this time with you and talking with you about this stuff. And it has become, I hope it has to you, but to me, it's become like a weekly occurrence that I cherish, because I get to spend time with you and talk about issues like this.
Oh, yeah. I love getting to get together and talk. And
yeah.
I hope that it's the same sort of encouragement for people that are listening or people that are watching.
Yes, I do. And if you do, again, I will go back to this. Subscribe to us on YouTube. Follow us on all the other platforms that you're on. And I want to thank, again, Zach Richards he puts all this together. He makes it sound good. He makes us look good. He takes out all the bloopers and botches that we do. But we try and be as real as we can with you, and I hope you enjoy it. I pray that God blesses you this week. Find a cause. Find a cause. Find a cause greater than yourself, and step out and make something happen. We appreciate you. God bless. We'll talk to you next week.